Good evening, everyone. My name is Jackie Lowy. I volunteer as the board chair for Uptown United, and we are thrilled to host this second Aldermanic Forum. Before we get all into it, I just wanted to share a lighthearted note that I was told because the Cubs won the opener, that means in the spirit of Groundhog's Day that we are going to have an early summer. So that's good. It is my huge pleasure to introduce our moderator this evening. I have the pleasure of getting to work with Sarah Wilson quite a bit in my role as board chair of Uptown United. Sarah Wilson serves as our executive director of both Uptown United and the Uptown Chamber of Commerce. Her career in both the private and public sector has been a value add to our organizations and the neighborhood. She served as a consultant in market analysis and development strategies to a variety of public and private sector clients prior to transitioning to the City of Chicago's Department of Planning and Development. After that, Sarah spent several years living abroad and returned to Chicago in 2019 with a broadened perspective on both planning and development. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from Youngstown State University and a Master's of Community Planning degree from the University of Cincinnati. She's uniquely positioned to navigate tonight's debate as her passion for public speaking stems all the way back from her time as a speech and debate coach in her hometown in Ohio. She is a former district champion in international extemporaneous speaking, state and national qualifier. For 4 years, she coached dozens of high school students in extemporaneous speaking. Quit making me say that word. It's a lot of syllables. Extemporaneous speaking and public forum debate, including district and state champions. Sarah lives in the 40th Ward with her family. Please help me to welcome Sarah Wilson. And before I hand over the microphone to her, I would be remiss if I didn't also thank the League of Women Voters of Chicago, who are joining us and partnering with us this evening. Just a little bit about them. They are a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights and to ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. Yes. They empower voters and defend democracy through advocacy and education. We are pleased to have Madeline, Catherine, and Ione. If you guys wouldn't mind just standing up real quick and waving to our crowd, and so we can thank you for your All right, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's great to see so many of you out here on opening day. So just a few housekeeping notes before we start. We are recording tonight, so we do ask that you keep volume levels low and you turn your cell phones either on mute or off. So if you could just kindly check your phones now, we'd appreciate that. Also, we are going to be doing a round of questions and topics ranging from government and constituent services to the environment, planning and development, transportation, public safety, and of course, your questions. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for not only serving as our timekeeper, but for collecting all of our audience questions. If you did not grab a note card when you first entered, please feel free at any point in time to get up and grab one and jot down your question and either kind of wave it or get someone from LWV's attention and they will bring it to you and bring them up to me and we will make sure questions get answered. So we are here tonight to dive deeper into topics around the 46th Ward, and we are pleased that both candidates are here tonight. We have Angela Clay and Kimberly Walz. Thank you both for being here tonight. So numbers were drawn at random for the seating order left to right, as well as who is going to start our first question. So with that being said, here we go, ladies. Candidates for office often run on ambitious platforms, extolling how their work and life experiences make them the most effective person to achieve proposed change. A now standard marker for success for local and national officials alike are, what did you accomplish in your first 100 days in office? So, as Alderperson, Angela, we'll start with you. What is your first 100 days plan?
Making sure that we are having conversations together, neighbor. Thank you so much for coming out and actually enjoying my birthday with me tonight. This is pretty special to have so many guests, okay? And I want to make sure that we are making community decisions together, that we are not just coming together when it's time for politics. I am a product of everything that this ward stands on, born and raised right around the corner on Hazel and Sunnyside. My former high school is actually directly across the street from us at Uplift Community High School. And it has been with neighbors that I found my passion to actually run for this seat. And I want to make sure within my first 100 days that we are putting together a plan of action on how we can continue to work together. We have a zoning and development board that currently does not reflect the entirety of our ward, and I think that we need to redistribute how we are making decisions and how we can rethink about what does zoning and development look like. I also want to make sure that within our first 100 days that I am just getting to know you, that you understand the neighbor that you have in this position, that you understand how intentional our planning will be, and how I want to work with you to do that. So I appreciate you again for being here. I'm sure we'll get into some deeper discussions, but thank you so much for being here tonight.
Wonderful. Kim, what would your first 100 days look like?
From what I'm hearing about efficiencies in the city, it might take 100 days just to get IT systems up in a new Aldermanic office, which is unfortunate. I have 10 years of experience in government, 8 years working for then Cook County Commissioner Mike Quigley, 2 years on the federal side. So I've actually run constituent service offices, and I know how to make them efficient. So there's a lot of things that I want to do differently from constituent services standpoint. First of all, I've already started looking at locations should I win to move the ward office to be more centrally located so it's more accessible. I want the ward office to be a destination where you just don't go for a parking sticker, but you can also be a place where the community can come together. I'd like to have workstations with computers where individuals who need to go online to access government services, apply for jobs, can actually have a place to go and have staff who can support that. And also have a community space in the office where if groups need to have a meeting, block clubs want to have planning sessions, they can actually come together and we work in building community together. I really want to also focus on having a more independent city council. I know the city council took some steps today to start moving towards that. There's more that we need to do. The city council has been a rubber stamp for the mayor for far too long, and independence is important to me. When I worked for Mike Quigley, I helped launch the reform movement in Cook County government, which some folks might not remember because I launched that 22 years ago, and really fought for greater transparency and accountability in city government, and that starts with independence. But then that continues on with really looking at how government is efficient and accountable with all of your tax dollars. I helped write 7 reports on how to restructure and reinvent government, really looking at how taxpayer dollars are being spent, and I want to do the same thing at the city. I also want to look at our zoning committee. I want to get away from piecemeal zoning decisions and actually work with all of you to create a neighborhood plan and see where does density make sense, where does it not make sense? Where do we need more green space? Where do we need more dog parks? Where do we really need to work to improve the commercial corridor? And I want to create a plan with you. And I also want to make sure that the zoning committee that we have for the ward actually represents the ward. We have one of the most diverse wards in the entire country, and our zoning committee doesn't really represent that. And I want to make sure that all the voices are included in the process. So there's a lot we need to get done in 100 days. I'm ready to hit the ground running on day 1. And that's why I've been endorsed by the Tribune and Governor Pritzker, Senator Tammy Duckworth, Senator Dick Durbin, Congressman Mike Quigley, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. a lot of labor unions, among others, because they know that I can get things done right away, and that's what we need. Getting things done, accountability, transparency, and action. And I'd be honored to serve as your Alderwoman.
I think you both have ambitious first 100-day plans, but technology on the city front is definitely a hurdle to overcome having that experience. So let's just dive right into governing and constituent services. Angela, the first question will be to you. City departments are understaffed, causing delays in services ranging from tree trimming and street and sanitation of our commercial corridors to processing license applications and permits. Both mayoral candidates are looking to trim spending in an effort to ensure stronger long-term fiscal solvency. Yet, many jobs remain open or unfilled across departments. So, Angela, as Alderperson, what is your plan for attracting qualified candidates to work for the city while balancing the finances?
Yeah, I think it first starts with transparency. Right now, we have no way to really dive deep into why these positions are unfilled at the moment, and that's an issue because if we have unfilled vacancies, it trickles down to us at the end of the day. We are the ones that are left without the services that we deserve and that we need. And these are great paying jobs. So the issue comes down to where are these being posted, where are they actually looking for work, and also making sure that we are using tools within our backyard to try to get these positions filled. We have an opportunity with our city colleges. We also have an opportunity with our local businesses and trades to really make sure that we can fill these positions all over the city. And I want to make sure that we are also offering that to neighbors who their first language is not English, that we are translating this material, that we are getting this in front of other qualified neighbors so that they too have the opportunities to get in front of these positions as well. So I think it comes to transparency. I definitely want to get in here and start having deeper conversations around what is the hiring process and what have we not had the opportunity to do. And then from there, making sure that this information is then translated, brought back to the community, brought back to our resources all over the city so that we can really fulfill these jobs and get the services that we need.
Thank you. And Kim, do you have a response to this approach of transparency, or what is your take?
So when I was in graduate school at Georgetown, I worked for a nonprofit, and I actually helped create a program called Look Ma, I'm a Bureaucrat. And we were trying to make public service careers interesting to people who are in public policy programs, because it's a struggle, because they get recruited by a lot of large corporations, a lot of large nonprofits, and other entities for their skills. And so I worked at the time to try and create that pipeline from public policy schools and public affairs into government's careers. And that's one thing I think we really need to do is look at the pipeline and how are we letting people know that they can really bring about change by working in government. And we should do that with all of our city colleges and actually just having people who work for the city going into the schools, talking about careers, talking about pathways, and showing an opportunity that people can have to succeed by going into government.
Let me just press you both a little bit further on this. What if the new mayor comes in and says that they want to remove those unfilled vacancies, key jobs potentially in departments, and in order to slash budgets and get us more fiscally solvent? How would you respond as councilperson if that means that there's fewer jobs open and available to your constituents? We'll start with you, Angela.
Yeah, I would push back. I think right now we are feeling the pressure of these unfilled roles, and it's having an effect on all of us all across the city. And so I think working with whoever becomes our next mayor is going to be crucial because they're going to get in this seat, they're going to come in with their own priorities, and they need to understand that as a city and as individual wards, we need to have these positions filled because we deserve these services as well. So I'm definitely going to make sure that I'm pushing back, that I'm asking questions on how we can make sure that not only are we fulfilling these jobs, but do we have the opportunity to hire more as well.
Kim?
So I think just saying you're not going to fill vacant positions is a lazy budgeting tool, because a lot of times departments have been experiencing a hiring freeze for a number of years, and they have positions that are really important to fill, and they're just not able to. And then this happened in Cook County, and then all of a sudden the administration comes along and says, well, we're going to eliminate all vacant positions. You don't know if those vacant positions are actually really important, such as police officers or people who are staffing 911 or people who are making sure people get their building permits that they need to open their small business in our community. And that's really crucial. And that's why we need to take a step back and really look at what each department is doing. And I want to have conversations not just with department heads. I want to have conversations with everyone working that department at all levels to find out where is there efficiencies that we can find. Because simply eliminating vacant positions doesn't get us to the root of the problem.
Thank you. And in the spirit of keeping our city afloat, let's talk about revenue generation. So revenue generation has been a topic of debate throughout this election. Terms like progressive revenue have been mentioned, but for many folks, they don't know what that means. Tapping into TIF surpluses, raising or implementing taxes on hotel accommodations, real estate transfers, cutting government waste, and then reinstating the employee head tax for companies that do more than half of their work in Chicago have all been suggested. There's lots of other items on the table that I did not get to. But critics call many of these options regressive. So, Kim, this question's for you. What are your specific plans for equitably generating additional revenue for the city?
Well, it goes back to what I mentioned first. Before talking about finding additional revenue sources, which can hurt working families, I want to look at how we're spending your money. You can't tell me that in a $16.9 billion budget in the city that there's not waste and there's not efficiencies to be found. I fully believe they are. And before I come back to any taxpayer who's already, our small businesses are still trying to recover from COVID, being hit by property tax increases that even if you're not a homeowner are going to ultimately impact your rent. Business owners are going to be possibly hit with a head tax. Before anyone should come back and say we need more taxpayer dollars and we need another blank check, we should be able to prove that government is working in the most efficient and accountable way that it can, and it just isn't. So at this current time, I don't support any new taxes.
Thank you, Kim. And Angela, you've endorsed Brandon Johnson, who is running on what's called progressive revenue streams. So what's your response to Kim's plan?
Yeah, I think that we need to look at all of the resources that we have in our toolbook right now. And one of those is just making sure that these large corporations that are coming into our city pay their fair share of taxes. A lot of the taxes that we have right now, they're being burdened by some of our neighbors who don't have a lot of income, but they are paying very high in taxes. And I want to make sure that that is becoming equitable to the largest corporations that are coming in this city. I also think that we have to look at when we are just proposing new taxes, if there are things that we can use right now, such as the real estate transfer tax, to make sure that we are getting streamlined of funding. For instance, for our houseless neighbors, we have an ordinance that would build in a streamline of revenue to actually house our most neediest neighbors right now. And I think that's something that we haven't really discovered, we haven't really dove deep into, and I want to make sure that we're doing that. But right now, our taxes are very regressive, and they're putting a lot of burden on our neighbors.
Well, let's keep on the topic of serving our neighbors. Weather here, as you all know, in Chicago can be very unpredictable, especially in the winter. But I just learned today that because the Cubs won on opening day, we're going to have an early summer, I guess. I did not know that was a thing. So we lucked out this year with winter. But in past years, we've been pummeled with snow. Property owners are legally obligated to clear the sidewalks in front of their properties within 24 hours of snowfall. For some property owners, that's a challenge. Alderman Villegas has introduced the Plow the Sidewalk ordinance, which would pilot the city plowing city sidewalks in systemically disinfested areas with lots of families, older residents, and disabled neighbors. There are many parts of the city that struggle just to have their side streets plowed during heavy snowfalls. So, Angela, this is to you. Your website says you support this effort. What are your proposed funding mechanisms for this new program, and how will you prioritize the streets and sidewalks?
Yeah, I think it goes back to us prioritizing historically where our sidewalks or our side streets have not been plowed. I know right here in the 46th Ward, we are extremely privileged because a lot of our neighbors have the opportunity to plow their own sidewalks, but some of them don't. And I want to make sure that we are prioritizing our elders, that we are prioritizing our neighbors with disabilities who don't have the opportunities to get out there and plow their own sidewalks. It has an extreme effect on all of us. If a vacant side street that used to be home to a local business is not there anymore, and the side streets are just flooded with snow. It trickles over into our gutters. It has long-term effects. So I want to make sure that we are not just looking at how we can make this possible for all of our neighbors. I want to make sure that we are also looking at if we can hire our young people to do this. If there are opportunities for young people coming out of high school or college to get gainful employment to do this. I had a former high school friend who every winter, him and his father would go down Hutchinson, Hazel, and plow their sidewalks or plow their streets. And I think that's something that we can definitely do as a city, and I want to make sure that, again, we are looking at different modes of how we can put that in front of people, that we are looking at our neighbors who have disabilities or have challenges or who are older and offering that service to them.
So, Kim, before I turn to you, let me just press you to the key part of the question is, what is the funding mechanism?
I think it goes back to us looking at our options in front of us when we're looking at taxes or our businesses. I think that we have an option here to really look at our budget. The city's budget is extremely large, you all, and it's over 300 pages if you haven't gotten a deep dive into it. And there's money in there that we could definitely be putting towards this project. I don't think that it is something that is going to dramatically change the city's budget. I think that we also have the funds within the city budget right now that is being put to other places that we can put here.
Thank you for that. And Kim, your response?
So I like the idea of having this program available to those who do not have the ability to plow their own sidewalk or in areas that have been disvested. Actually, the way the law works right now is that if you're able to plow your sidewalk, or you're supposed to receive a fine. So if you're a business and not plowing your sidewalk, or a homeowner, there's a fine system in place. So I would like to explore the possibility of taking any of that fine revenue and actually using that to fund the program to plow the sidewalks for individuals who are unable to do that. We tend to create a budget in government where we have this need for people to fail in order to balance the budget through parking tickets, paying things late. And what I find so frustrating about that, beyond the fact that that's used for a budgetary purpose, is those funds aren't actually used to help in that situation in the past. So if you have late fees and property taxes, why isn't that money going to help people who have property tax challenges? So if we're going to be fining people or commercial businesses for not plowing their sidewalks, let's actually use that revenue to help those who can't.
Thank you. So our next question has been provided to us by our partners, the League of Women Voters. Each alder has control of the ward's menu funds, so discretionary funds that can be used on ward's needs. Each alder has a different approach to allocating these funds. So Kim, this is to you. What process will you undertake to determine how menu funds are spent in the 46th ward?
So I'm going to have a participatory process for the menu funds, and if you're not familiar with it, it's $1.5 million that the Alderman's office can allocate towards project and awards. And having that public participation is really important because you might not realize what their needs are. I had a conversation with someone a few months ago who's my age and is losing their vision, and they specifically moved to Chicago because they wouldn't have to drive. Well, they need an audible crosswalk. They requested one 5 years ago. It got approved a year and a half ago, and it's still not up. And the problem that she's faces is only going to continue to get worse because we have more and more electric cars coming on our streets, and people can't hear them and they can't see them. It's very dangerous for them. So it's conversations like that are really important, going to help me guide my decision, but it's going to be a very inclusive process so that we are going to build this neighborhood together.
And Angela, what would your process be?
Yeah, this is an area that me and Kim actually agree on. I want to make sure that we have accessible participatory budgeting, that we are getting in front of our neighbors to make sure that they know that these funds are here, and these are some of the suggestions that have been provided to us by small businesses, block clubs, or even everyday neighbors. And I want to make sure again that we are doing this in an equitable way. As a diverse community, a lot of our neighbors, English is not their first language. And I'm very proud of this campaign because we have translated material in over 10 different languages because we want to make sure that every single neighbor has the same access. And that's exactly what I want to do with this budgeting process. I want to make sure that it is accessible. I want to make sure that it is being provided in a number of ways, whether that is online, whether that is survey, whether that is in person, because everyone's schedule is different. As a mom, my life is all over the place every day, and I want to make sure that we are offering grace and accessibility to every neighbor.
Thank you. So let's turn to, I think, a topic that has sort of been under the radar a little bit, but we are all experiencing the effects of it, the environment. The city of Chicago, over a decade ago, dissolved its Department of Environment, leaving a broad range of environmental issues to be dealt with across scattered departments. We're seeing organizations such as ICA initiating their own green standards and renovations to make the 46th Ward as green as possible. You both have stated your support for the reestablishment of the Department of Environment. Kim, we'll start with you. What do you think are the most urgent environmental issues facing the 46th Ward, and how do you plan on addressing them? Please be as specific with any targeted actions or funding mechanisms you plan to utilize.
So I'm really excited about the program ICA has been working on to bring more solar energy to the ward. I think that's really important, and that's one thing I would want to use my connections on the federal level and the state level is to help secure more funding so more individuals can participate in this. The challenge with a lot of the environmental upgrades and retrofits, they're not as accessible to everyone, because if you are barely covering your property taxes or your rent or other upgrades to your house, you probably can't afford a solar panel, even though it's going to lead to long-term cost savings. So I really want to work to put government mechanisms in place to help people afford this so they can live greener lives. Another thing that's going to be impacting the 46th Ward is the Redefine the Drive project, which, if you're not familiar with that, is a massive program to redo most of Lakeshore Drive. Ultimately, it's supposed to be about public safety, infrastructure improvements, and strengthening the S-curve. But what's going to happen in the 46th Ward is we're actually going to be losing green space. They are going to be getting rid of the tennis courts, they're going to be putting a bus turnaround in the middle of the park, and they're going to have buses idling next to the bird sanctuary, and that's not acceptable. The plan has to be approved by the City Council, and the current plan I do not support, and I will not vote for it if I'm on the City Council, because I will not support taking away green space in our community. So I would say helping people access environmental upgrades and making sure that we protect the Great Lakes are top priorities for me. I also was a gubernatorial appointee on a binational Great Lakes Commission, and I've worked on this issue before for Great Lakes protection.
Kim, before we turn over to Andrew, just real fast, what kind of mechanisms would you put in place to allow residents to be able to access any type of green standards? Can you be more specific?
So what I would do is I would talk to our members of Congress and see if there are earmarks available to help green the community, and then put a process in place. I'd have to look at the legalities around how we would put an application process in place to access these funds. Maybe the funds would go to a nonprofit such as ICA to administer the funds, but I'd have to look at how legally we're able to distribute the funds and have a process in place to do it.
Thank you for further clarifying. Angela, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. So definitely Redefine the Drive is going to be a topic of concern in our ward. I'm a proud carbon cheerleader, as we call ourselves with the ICA building, making sure that we are looking at the ward specifically and how we can cut our carbon footprint. I also am a proud student of Uplift, which has an amazing collection of solar panels, right? And I want to be looking at other opportunities that we can provide that for other businesses or large developments in our ward. I also want to look into this lead water problem that we have. We have lead pipes, you all over the city of Chicago. That is a huge concern to us because we have not dived deep enough to see why are we not fixing them, why don't we have a robust plan to actually fix them, and how can they be tagged to green new jobs. So I definitely think that Redefine the Drive is something that's going to be in our backyard that we have to talk about, but also looking at the lead in our water pipes is something that we have to tackle immediately.
Well, we're going to continue on this topic, Angela. This next one's for you. You've made decarbonizing the city by 2030 a key environmental campaign issue for you, but that's only 7 years away, which is just kind of astounding. But as Alderperson, what does decarbonization look like in the 46th Ward, and how will you overcome the potential hurdles and roadblocks which can come from a multitude of directions, city bureaucracy, property owners, you name it, you're going to face a roadblock. How would you tackle those to make decarbonization happen?
Yeah, so the first part of that is how do we get over the roadblocks? And I think it comes down to relationships, and I think it comes down to us getting the information out to folks. Right now, a lot of our neighbors don't even know how we are already trying to provide us with the footprint of how do we decarbonize ourselves. And I think that the ICA has done a great job, but I would love to get their mission out in front of you more. I would love to have more carbon footprint cheerleaders on board all across this ward. I also want to make sure that we as a community that has a robust public transportation system are making sure that those electric buses are coming into fruition all around our ward and our city. I think that is going to be a game changer in our city, and I think specifically in our ward where we have so many access to bus lines all across the city, that will be a huge help to making sure that we are not just continuing to overload our ward with carbon.
And let me just probe you a little bit more too on the lead pipe issue as well. This is an issue that I think is being tackled nationwide and has been very slow to be tackled. Why don't you dive in a little bit further on how you would get the city to accelerate its efforts to remove and replace all the lead pipes?
Yeah, I think again it goes back to our neighbors having to know that this has been a problem in our water system for decades, that we drink lead water, every one of us. And so when people hear that and you hear the side effects that lead has on people, on children, on mothers, I think we really have not sounded the alarm loud enough. And I want to make sure that we're doing that so that we are pressuring the city to say, look, you are putting your constituents, your citizens in grave danger, and this is how we organize to make sure that they're putting their money where their mouth is. The outgoing mayor had a plan on how we tackled these lead water pipes, and they put a very small dent in that plan. And I want to make sure that we are pressuring the new mayor who is coming in to really have a robust plan to fulfill in creating jobs and making sure that we're getting the lead out of our water pipes, because it is impacting each and every single last one of us.
Kim, you've also made lead pipes a key component of your campaign as well. So please respond to Angela's approach, and how would your approach differ, if at all?
So one thing that I hear over and over again, and I personally find very frustrating, is doesn't it always seem like we're digging up the road to fix something, and then we pave it over, and then we dig it up again to do something else, the same road over and over and over again? I think we should have a plan and a policy in place in the city of Chicago that if you're working on a road for whatever reason and there's lead pipes in that area, then when the road is broken up, you should access the lead pipes and fix the problem then. The challenge is it's very expensive to fix the lead pipes, and so they make all these excuses that they don't have the funding, they don't have the time, but if you're already digging up the road and have access to the water lines, you should do it there and get it done. There are over 400,000 households in Chicago with access to lead pipes. We have to have a more expedited plan in place to get this done. We should do it in coordination with our activities. And if the timeline is too long, we should have water filtration systems available for every household until we're able to have a more permanent fix to the problem.
Thank you very much. So we're going to switch topics to, I think, one which could be heavily debated. We're going to talk about planning and development. You know, Uptown United, its mission is to focus on and cultivate a thriving uptown, and part of that is through smart urban planning initiatives. We're all acutely aware of of inflation's impacts on our wallets. I think you've all seen it at the grocery store, but it also has impacted redevelopment and construction projects as well. So lingering effects from the COVID-19 pandemic remain: supply chain delays, increased material and labor costs, plus slower permit review times, all lead to higher construction costs. These costs either get passed down to tenants or cuts are made elsewhere in the project to ensure financial viability. A common issue that Uptown United hears is that commercial rents are too high or inaccessible. So Kim, this question's to you. In our January forum, you had mentioned making commercial space more affordable for small business owners as a priority. So as Alderperson, what specific steps would you take to ensure more affordable commercial spaces exist in the 46th Ward?
So one of the biggest impacts here is property taxes. I didn't realize until I was having conversations with small business owners across the board that a lot of times, even though they're renting their property, it's in their lease that they have to cover the entire property tax bill. So how are they supposed to budget year to year when they're already trying to recover from COVID when our property taxes are skyrocketing? The property tax increase for commercial properties in the ward was double the city average in the last tax bill. And that is so difficult for these small businesses to overcome. So what I would want to do is work with our partners on the state level and the county level to look at what kind of property tax exemptions we can put in place for our small business owners so we can help them thrive. Because that's one of the biggest challenges they're facing today, in addition to the complete mess of bureaucracy we have in the city to help them get and open and continue to maintain their business.
Let me just press you on that. So would the property tax exemption be filed by the business owner who may be renting their space, or would it be a small business owner who also owns the space that they're in? Could you clarify that?
Well, so an exemption would have to be applied for by the owner of the property, but if it's a small business owner who rents their property and is responsible for the property taxes, they would receive the benefit of that.
Thank you for clarifying. Angela, how would your process differ?
Yeah, I think we need to get information in front of our small business owners about what is available to them. There are grants available that could help them open small businesses, especially businesses that are women-owned or minority-owned. And again, I think those are just the tools that we have to get in front of our small businesses. Right now, as a community, a lot of our small business owners are struggling. When I have conversations with them, of course, property tax is at the topic of that. But it's also about information. They don't feel like they know where to go for quality information around accessibility, around how to fill forms out, just around all of the red tape that goes into opening a small business. And again, that's something that I want to make sure that we are getting in front of them, that we are not just helping our small businesses that are here thrive, but that we are also attracting new small businesses and showing them that we have a blueprint for them to thrive as well.
Let me press you on this. As most commercial rents are established by the owner of the space, and a small business owner can negotiate what the rent is, but how a grant doesn't necessarily go directly towards a tenant to reduce the rent. So what specific steps would you take to reduce rent or keep commercial rent space more affordable for that small business owner?
And again, it goes back to relationships, because if our small businesses are just sitting vacant, that is not a win for the owner of that business. It's not a win for us as a community. And so again, I think it's giving our small business owners the tools to show them how they can negotiate their rents, and also building relationships with commercial owners to say, hey, you can have a long-term tenant here if we were able to reduce the rents. My current campaign office is in a former nail salon, my former nail salon at that. And it has been tremendous to see how eager they were to get anyone in there, because they were paying so much in taxes to just have a vacant storefront. And so when we came in and we threw them a price, we negotiated it, and we've been in there for months. And that's something that, again, I want to make sure that our neighbors, that our small business owners know how to do.
Thank you, appreciate that. So let's dive a little bit deeper. Development is occurring all around the 46th Ward, both by right and with zoning changes. Currently, only projects seeking adjustments, either a zoning change or a special use, receive community feedback. Angela, I'm going to start with you on this question. At the January forum, you mentioned the need for a transparent and inclusive process when reviewing projects. You even mentioned it at the top of this event tonight. What exact steps will a developer need to go through under your review process? Please go through a step-by-step approach that the developers and neighbors can all come to expect when a new project is presented for the ward.
Absolutely. I think it has to come down to information, making sure that they have a full-fledged deck that we can distribute to you via physically or in your email, or even just having a town hall conversation. I also want them to dig deeper into the financing. One of the key questions that I've been getting when I go around and talk to neighbors about different projects that go up is, who's financing this? How do they get the money for this? And that needs to be transparent with our neighbors as well, because that really does impact our decisions. And so we have to make sure that these developments are not just solid foundationally, but we have to make sure that they are also solid financially. And I want to make sure that all of that information is included when developers are coming into our community and saying, we want to build with you. I also want to make sure that they have on-site affordable housing in the developments that have larger units in them. I think we have an opportunity right now to develop without displacement. Our community is reliant on making sure that we have equitable housing. And I also want to make sure that developers are building more family housing. We are a community of elementary schools and a high school that is robust, but it does not have the amount of students that it needs because we are not building affordable housing for families around it. And so now, as a community, we are left to carry the burden of schools that may be closed down and then redeveloped into higher luxury in lofts, right? So I want to make sure that when we are developing, that we have every single piece of the pie to make equitable decisions on how to build.
Kim, you've also made it clear that a priority for you is making the process transparent and inclusive and more reflective of the community. So how would your process differ? And please go through a step-by-step approach that a developer or neighbor can expect.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I want to start the process earlier. I don't want it to be that I want to build a building here, so let's now have the conversation. I want to go back and I want to say to the community, and let's have community meetings, let's have a very open process about what kind of neighborhood do we want to build together, and where do certain types of buildings make sense and where don't they make sense. So before a developer even comes to the office and requests a change, we actually have a map and a plan for the community that we worked on together. So that would be the first step, is does it really match this master plan for the ward? And second of all, they have to present to the community, the surrounding community and the community at large, because all development in the ward impacts the block that it's on, but also the entire community. Because if we're not building more housing, all of our existing housing is going to continue to get more unaffordable. We need to make sure that there's 20% affordable units on site. And I want to work to see if we're able to prioritize people who already live in the ward and are part of this community in those 20%. So it's got to be a very community open process.
Thank you both. We're going to dive a little bit deeper now. We're going to talk about funding mechanisms. Tax increment financing is a heavily debated and scrutinized economic development tool. There are examples of both failures and successes across the city. An excellent example is Wilson Yard. Shepherded by former Alderwoman Helen Schiller and Mayor Daley, the Wilson Yard TIF, by many measures, has met the goals outlined in its establishment criteria. The transit TIF was created to support the renovation of the Red Line, which we all see every day parallel to Broadway going on. And a new transit TIF was approved to assist the long overdue Red Line extension to our neighbors on the far south side. So Kim, I'm going to start with you on this question. As Alderperson, you will be faced with expiring TIFs and maybe new TIF districts. What is your criteria for either the establishment or expiration of TIF districts and the use for TIF funds for projects? Please be as specific as you can. Thank you.
Generally with TIFs, there has to be a lot more accountability and transparency. When I worked for Mike Quigley, we were one of the first offices to actually shine light on TIF abuse. So first of all, you have to go back to the original criteria of a TIF. And so whether, to answer your question, I would ask, does the TIF, meet the criteria? The criteria is you're supposed to be creating TIFs in areas that would be blighted, that there would not be development but for the creation of a TIF. So it has to meet the state definition of that. And if it doesn't meet that, then we're not moving forward because it doesn't apply for TIF. What we have to do is we really have to take a hard look at our expiring TIFs. Right now, the TIF that is $13 million available for the renovation of the Uptown Theater, which is so important for this community and its growth because it's going to have so much investment in the community once it's done, it's expiring at the end of 2025. So we need to move forward before we lose these TIF funds. So if we're going to allocate TIF funds, we need to make sure they're actually being spent and they're being used to support the community.
What criteria, though, would you use for approving a project that applies for TIF? What's your criteria for that?
So is it actually blighted? Would there not be development but for the development of the TIF? That would be the top criteria for me.
And Angela, how would your process differ, if at all?
Well, I think we need to look at all of the TIFs in our ward because we are a ward full of TIFs, you all, if you do not know. And we can't TIF our way out of everything. Right now, we have some TIFs that are expiring that we need to look at if we're going to extend them or if we're going to use the funds that are sitting in those TIFs for other reasons. And I think right now we have an opportunity to say, okay, are we moving? Has this TIF in the last 23 years actually exceeded, like the one at the Wilson Yards? I feel like the one at the Wilson Yards is a great example of a successful TIF. We not only got the target, but we got a slew of commercial spaces, and then we also had affordable housing that was built specifically for our elders and for our families. And so when we're looking at our TIFs that may be expiring, we need to say, okay, has it fulfilled all of its promises to combat blight? Has it built housing? Has it built accessibility? And if we need to continue to move forward with that TIF, how do we extend it? And making sure that we're using the overflow of funds that will be there to go back into the community.
Let me press you on the question about specifically a project requesting TIF funds. What criteria would you use in order to either approve or disapprove a project requesting TIF funds for assistance?
I think we should look at how many units of housing will it build. I think we should look at how many affordable units of housing will it build. I think we need to look at the accessibility of the TIF. Are we building this around making sure that people have access to transportation? I think we need to look at if this is going to impact, our environment. I think we also need to look at who is this going to really serve at the end of the day? Because we have TIFs that are serving our businesses, and we also have TIFs right now that aren't really serving the entire community. So I want to make sure that we have a clear-cut TIF outline of, are you bringing jobs? Is this going to make sure that we are bringing jobs? Is this going to make sure that we are developing equitably? And making sure that, again, if there are access funds in those TIFs, instead of just extending it, that we can put it right back into our community.
Thank you for that. So let's dive in. Let's dive into a topic that you just mentioned, transportation. Safer streets are a high priority for many 46th Ward questions. During our January forum in the precursor, we got so many questions about transportation and public safety on transit. We've heard recommendations for improvements ranging from bump outs to protected bike lanes. Yet, as heard in the Clark Street Corridor study, which Uptown United actively participated in and supported, there's a balance to be struck between safer streets and commercial needs. Angela, I'm going to pose this to you first. As Alderperson, how will you balance the needs of pedestrians and cyclists with the needs of businesses, which often rely upon some form of parking for customers and deliveries?
Yeah, so I think that we have an opportunity to do both, because we shouldn't be prioritizing business revenue over people's lives. Right now in the city of Chicago, we have an opportunity to turn our city into a bike grid. And I'm extremely proud that we have been endorsed by Better Street Chicago, because they have looked at our plans and saying, okay, how do we protect our pedestrians? How do we protect our cyclists? I tell folks all the time that I am a cyclist, and I refuse to cycle in this ward. In the last 3 years, I have not put my baby on the back of my bike, because unfortunately we had a tragedy a few blocks away from here where a child was killed. And so I think that we can do this both. I think businesses need to understand that they will get more customers if they had protected bike lanes and they had actual protection for our cyclists. And I also think that our businesses understand that as a city, we can't prioritize one mode over the other. Whether you bike, whether you drive, whether you are a skater, we should have the accessibility and the infrastructure for you to get around this city.
Thank you. And Kim, in our January forum, you had stated that there needs to be more protected bike lanes throughout the ward and across the city. So how would you balance the needs of our commercial tenancies, needs for transportation to park right in front of their storefront, and the desire to have protected bike lanes, etc.?
So I agree with Angela. I believe we can do both. We can look at the types of bike lanes that we're building to make sure that we also have access when necessary for parking as well. You know, there are absolutely people in the city who want to use biking as their primary mode of transportation. But like Angela, I'm scared to bike in the streets because it just takes one person looking at their phone for a second to accidentally hit someone and have more people die on the streets, and it's unacceptable. So we do need protected bike lanes, but we need to do it in a balanced way so that small businesses also have access to individuals who might need to drive. Maybe they have mobility needs and they need to drive the store to get what they need. So I think we can have a balance there.
Thank you. Let's switch to another mode of transportation, the CTA. CTA continues to be a main focus in this election, not just for the 46th Ward, but across the city. Both of you have previously stated that improving CTA is a priority and they must be held accountable. So Kim, what does accountability look like in practice to you?
So safety in the CTA is a major issue right now. I was talking to someone in a building meet and greet yesterday, and they're talking about how they used to take the red line to work, just to the Fullerton stop. And they don't feel safe on the red line anymore, so they take 3 buses instead of getting on the red line to get to work. 3 buses, because they feel that unsafe on the train. So the first place accountability needs to start is with security. When I talked to the CTA about this, they told me we have a $41 million contract of your tax dollars paying for security on the trains. And you're probably thinking, what's security on the trains? That's what I hear all the time. Like, what are they and what are they doing? And there's not enough questions being asked. The city council needs to hold the CTA more accountable for the taxpayer dollars they're spending and ask the simple question of, what is security doing on the train? Because they're not doing enough. I've had to talk to individuals who've actually tried to talk to the security officers on the train and let them know about situations happening on the train. And the security officer literally said to them, well, what do you want me to do about it? I don't know, do your job maybe. So let's have some accountability. Let's start asking the tough questions. And before the CTA gets another dime from the city council, they should start saying no.
Yeah, so first comes to mind is, why has our public transportation turned into a shelter and a mental health hospital? Honestly, why are our neighbors stuck with the only option of being on a public transportation system, riding it back and forth all night long? And I think that we need to invest in our mental health resources. I think that we definitely need to invest in our shelters. Our shelter system right now is completely flawed. We don't have enough family shelters. Some of them are not safe, and some of them are riddled with bed bugs. And we are pushing our neighbors who need the most support out to public transportation. I think that we also have an opportunity to look into unarmed conductors, right? Bringing back unarmed conductors is something that we haven't really dove in. And then last but not least, why are buses ghost busting us? What is the hiring and retention process going on at CTA right now? They haven't been transparent about it at all. And as my role in city council, it is to go to them and ask these tough questions about, who are you hiring? And what is your plan to giving the current staff in CTA the flexibility to have a real life so that they are not working overtime and that they are not putting our neighbors in more danger?
Well, let me before we get off transportation, it's been in the news that obviously one of the mayoral candidates supports the firing of the head of CTA. So let me pose the questions to you. Do you support a change in leadership at CTA?
I'm not there yet, but I think that the current leadership that we have can do better. I think that the current leadership that we have right now has not done all of its due diligence to be transparent enough about what they are doing behind closed doors. We haven't even been able to get a meeting with them, right? So if you feel that strongly that a person has not been doing their job to the fullest extent, at some point maybe it is time to hire someone new. But I think going in the gate and just saying I want to fire somebody is not the solution. I think you need to go in there and work with them and see if we can do something in the interim. And then, and only then, if there's an issue that is not being fixed, let's start from scratch.
Kim, do you support a change in leadership, or what approach would you take?
What I find frustrating about the leadership of the CTA is the city council asks for them to come and appear before the city council, ask their questions time after time after time, and they only showed up when they needed money. And that's not acceptable to me. We put up with a lot in city government, we accept a lot of mediocrity, and I think we need to stop doing that. But whether or not I can say I think they should be removed from their position, I can't necessarily agree with that, because maybe there's an opportunity for change, but I think it's a really bad look to not appear before the body unless you want money.
Thank you both for tackling that topic. Let's go to another topic that we received tons of questions on back on our January forum, which is public safety. Public safety rightfully remains front of mind for neighbors and business owners. We received so many questions about public safety, as I mentioned. And if you subscribe to any of the neighborhood apps, you'll receive notifications about shots fired, stores being robbed, citizens being assaulted, doors being pried open, and mail-in packages being stolen. I mean, we at United in the Chamber just a few weeks ago witnessed a police chase up literally in front of our sidewalk, trying to chase down a reported handgun. So Kim, let's just start with you. You've made restaffing the Chicago Police Department a key strategy for addressing public safety concerns, as has mayoral candidate Paul Vallis. Critics question the viability to fill the vacancies, or in the case of the candidate Vallis, the notion that retire/rehire will occur at rates publicly stated. So as alderperson, what steps will you take to fill the vacancies not only in our 19th and 20th police districts, but across the city as staffing shortages continue to remain an issue?
So public safety is something I hear over and over again while out talking to neighbors across the community. And to some people it means they don't feel safe walking to the grocery store. To some people it means they don't feel safe in interaction with the police. Other people don't necessarily feel safe in their own home. So it means a lot of things. I believe that filling the vacant position should be a part of the solution. We do need to have long-term solutions, such as investing in communities and education and housing and dealing with violence prevention. But we need to make sure we have enough officers on the street. And the way the city council can be a part of this, one example is there's been an ordinance pending for the city council that would have a recruitment bonus in place to try and attract new officers. But we also have to deal with the issue that a lot of officers, there's a lot of morale issues. They don't have enough mental health resources. We're not giving them the tools and the support that they need to do their job, so they actually want to continue to be police officers. We need to provide that support. But we also have to look at how we're training our officers, and I have some concerns about just bringing retired officers back in because of issues with training in the past. We only are in compliance with 5% of the consent decree. That's completely unacceptable, and that's why we need to retain current funding levels, because we have to have money to hire staff, and we have to have money to actually train our officers so we can improve their interactions with the public, and that's really important, and that's why I'm committed to making sure we fill these positions. We also have to look at filling the desk positions in the police department, because what's happening is if HR is not prioritizing desk roles, they're pulling sworn officers off the street, out of their cars, off their beats to fill desk jobs, which is a completely inefficient use of resources and not a way to help keep our community safe.
Angela, I believe your approach to public safety and CPD varies or differs slightly, so what is your response?
Yeah, my response is simple. All across this ward, we have great examples of how to keep us safe. And it goes beyond our police. Our police are our first line of defense when it comes to responding to crime, but we need to be actually putting some money into getting in front of crime. We need to be trying to prevent it. Right now, our police officers are completely overworked. They are put in some traumatic experiences every single day, and we are just sending them back out on the beat like nothing happened. And I think that that's wrong. I think that that is setting us up for failure, and I want to make sure that we are supporting them. I also want to make sure that we are supporting each other as neighbors. Look, a safe community is when you get to know your neighbors, when you know your small business owners, when you get to know your police officers. And I want to lean on this new ECPS position, Empowering Communities for Public Safety, that you voted on a few weeks ago with me, to making sure that we are relying on them to say, hey, what are the resources that our police officers need, and what are the resources that our community need, so that we can continue to work to build them both.
Thank you both. So let's go to a topic that you alluded to a little bit in both of your questions, the need to address mental health services. Kim, I just want to start with you. Your personal lived experience with mental health challenges within family frames your approach to servicing our neighbors in need of assistance. The need is most evident under our viaducts. You previously mentioned you'll work to develop financial incentives and programs to develop more supportive housing. What are those incentives, and what approach will you take to help our neighbors in need of housing and wraparound services?
So the frustration I have with our approach to trying to help our unhoused neighbors is I feel like the city's really trying to check a box, and I find that very frustrating as someone who's tried to help an unhoused brother who suffers from mental illness for over 30 years now. And what the city always says is, well, we went and asked them if they wanted a warm place to stay, and they said no, so we'll go back next week. Well, why aren't we having these conversations and asking why? Why is someone choosing, and I use that term very loosely, to stay in a tent in Chicago winter when they could go somewhere warm? And the fact is we have 20 to 30% less shelter beds than we did before the pandemic. And those shelter beds, individuals don't often feel safe. I've heard of individuals telling me that they know people who've been assaulted in shelters and they don't want to go there. Or they're not able to bring their belongings. Imagine you lost your home tomorrow and all of your belongings you had in the whole world were in the tent with you, and you couldn't bring them. So you're not going to go. Or it might be a shelter where you have to get up in the morning and get in line just to get a bed for the same night. You're spending your whole day staying in line. There's no dignity in that. So we need to improve the short-term shelter situation, but we dramatically need to improve how we're taking care of those suffering from mental health challenges. Last time I tried to get a bed in the state for my brother to help him, this was last month, I was told it would be 7 months before the state would have a bed for him. Why is it we always have enough beds in jail, but we never have enough beds for people actually to get help? It's a complete lack of priorities that we need to change, and something I'm going to be dedicated to at the City Council.
Angela, what would your approach be?
Yeah, so my approach is simple. It's making sure that they have the resources that they need to thrive. Right now, we have closed all of our public mental health facilities. One that was specifically right here in this ward. And that has trickled down into what we see when we walk outside these doors. And that's something that I want to fight to reopen. I want to fight to reopening our public mental health institutes. I want to make sure that we are also looking at the opportunity to partner and bring private and public partnership together. When I had a child at the height of this pandemic and tried to reach out to someone because I didn't have the help that I needed, the wait list was 7 months to even talk to someone. People don't have 7 months. And right now we are just pushing them to the outskirts, or we are pushing them to the CTA to deal with this untreated mental health issue. So I think that as a city, we deserve, and our neighbors who are dealing with this on a very personal level, deserve the same access that we have, access to quality health care, access to great housing, and access to getting back into society. A lot of our neighbors who I've spoken to who live in tents, who may have mental health issues, want to get back into society, but we don't have the options right now currently for them to do so.
Before we switch topics, let me just quickly do a follow-up on that. You mentioned a public-private partnership. Is there a specific example that you have in mind that you could just briefly mention so that we all have a little bit of context?
Yeah, so we have private mental health workers right here in this ward, and some of them have come to our campaign and said, how can I help? And they've wanted to offer their services. I'm on the current local school council of Brenneman, where 75% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch. And they're experiencing some heavy trauma every single day. And when that was brought to the local school council's attention, we immediately hopped on it and started to reach out to local therapists and psychologists in this ward, and they offered their help. And so I think that's something that we need to do, is that we need to look into the resources that we have right here and saying, hey, these are your neighbors right here who don't have the accessibility, they don't have the funds, and they don't have the time, but are you able to help? Because I think that they will.
Thank you for that. So the proposed Bring Chicago Home ordinance would increase the real estate transfer tax on all real estate transactions of $1 million or more on both residential and commercial properties to create a permanent funding stream for homelessness services. This measure failed to come to a city council vote last November. Critics claim that this will be spun as a property tax hike and deter potential investment in the city. Angela, you are a proponent of this ordinance. Please respond to critiques of this proposed ordinance and provide any clarity on its impact on our neighbors here in the 46th Ward.
Yeah, so let's be clear. We need to find a solution for our houseless neighbors. Right now, we have an ordinance called Bring Chicago Home, which would give us over $80 million in streamlined funding to actually deal with that problem and house our neighbors. And that would impact real estate transfers over $1 million, which is a very small percentage of the entire makeup of our stock, housing and commercial. And this is something that we have to do. Right now, we don't have any types of streamlined funding that will give us effectiveness in housing our neighbors. This is something that, especially in the 46th Ward, when we are talking about community safety or public safety, we have to take into account that we have neighbors that are living under a viaduct, multiple viaducts. And that is something that we have to tackle. I think people understand that we can't just tax our way out of it, but we do have to look at where can we get this money from. And I think that the Bring Chicago Home ordinance is something that we have the opportunity to do. The reason why this was not brought to City Council to even have a conversation is because we didn't have the amount of alder people to even show up and vote on it, which our outgoing alderperson didn't show up. So as a community that deals with these issues very personally, we have to make sure that when we have the opportunity to solve it, that we show up. And that's something that I'm committed to doing.
Kim, what is your position on the proposed ordinance? And please respond to Angela's answer.
So I think we absolutely need a dedicated funding source to deal with homelessness, our unhoused neighbors, and getting them into housing. My concern is if you're completely having that revenue source based on unpredictable and unstable revenue source, then we won't necessarily have the same funds year after year, because it's based on the assumption that you're gonna have a certain number of transactions over $1 million. I wanna find a dedicated revenue source in the corporate fund for the same purpose with the same amount of money that actually isn't built or based on a fund that varies year to year. And the amount coming into the real estate transfer tax does vary year by year. And I think if we're gonna truly treat the unhoused like the crisis that it is in the city, we need to put the money behind it through a fund that will be the same year after year after year through the corporate fund.
So let's turn to a topic that I'm passionate about. I have an almost school-age child. You both are mothers with children here in the city of Chicago. So let's talk about education. This question was provided to us by our partners, the League of Women Voters. You've both publicly stated your desire for Uplift High School to receive neighborhood designation. Chicago's 50 aldermen don't have obvious power over city schools. They don't choose who sits on the education board or pick the school's chiefs or have any say over closing of schools. They don't control the budgets, the contracts, or any personnel issues. So Angela, I'm gonna start with you on this question. How can you as an alderperson still have an impact on the quality and trajectory of schools here in the 46th Ward?
Something that I'm extremely proud of is I had the opportunity of connecting all of our local elementary schools, not even just here in the 46th Ward, but nearby, to Uplift Community High School. You would think that that was something that was already happening, but at the height of COVID, we realized we needed to be talking to each other. Our students are sharing the same information, and how do we get this out to them? And that relationship was really key because it got them to not only share students, it got students in the building, and they started to talk about programs that they could do amongst themselves. And again, we have a fully elected school board, you all, that is coming to fruition. We are going to be leaning on them to make sure that the quality of education all around this city is offered to every single child. Right now, we are giving every single student the same amount of resources or funds, no matter where you live. And we know that that's not equitable. We know that our neighbors in Lincoln Park have higher resources than our neighbors in West Woodlawn or West Lawndale. And we need to make sure that our children, at the core, that their educations are not being impacted by just their zip code. So I want to make sure that we are building relationships with our schools, that we are relying on our schools that surround this ward, and that we really are relying on a gem of a high school that we have in our backyard. We have an amazing curriculum of students, of young people, of teachers that has not gotten the fair share of help that it needs. And so as Alderperson, I am fully committed to making sure that every school in our ward has the access and has the resources that I have at City Council to make it trickle down to every single student.
Kim?
So you're right, the alderman can't force CPS to do this. But what we can do is work to make sure the community understands what a valuable resource Uplift is to our community and help work to make the school the best it can be so that the neighbors want to go there. And as we bring more children into the school, then we can demonstrate to CPS that it should be our neighborhood school. But what's happening right now is because we have a lot of inequitable funding in the state of Illinois. I mean, I'm sure you're aware that the quality of your education in Illinois depends on your zip code, which is unacceptable. And the CPS doesn't follow the state funding formula, and instead of giving money to the neediest schools, it just gives it based on how many pupils you have. So I think they have like 80 to 85 students at the high school, even though they have amazing resources there, and they have a pool. They have access to a program where you can graduate from Uplift High School with an associate's degree. So I want to work with the community so that more community members want to go there, so we can demonstrate to CPS the quality and the desire for it to be a greater part of our community.
Thank you both for that topic. We've covered a lot of ground, but now I want to turn it over to our friends at the League of Women Voters for any audience questions that may have come through. This is your last chance. If you have not written down a question, oh, we have one right behind you to take into consideration. Okay, so as we sort through, this is the topic you briefly mentioned, but we're getting a number of questions around it, so we're going to go back to it. Knowing the Uptown Theater is privately owned, this question is going to be for both of you, how will we work with the owner to ensure this historically significant theater becomes operable again? Again, we've had several questions on this. So, Angela, I'm going to start from left to my left, so we'll start with you.
So, the Uptown Theater, a gym in our backyard that has been sitting vacant for years now, and it has come down to funding, you all. And I think that we have to get creative. I think that we need to start looking at what are the sources that we could really be going after to not just preserve it, but to bring it back to life. It could not only become the gym that it once was again, but it could also be hiring right here in our neighborhood that would bring some great jobs. And so I think it is, again, getting in front of the owners of the Uptown Theater, looking at the resources that we have with our chambers, with other funding sources, and saying, okay, how can we close this gap of a budget shortfall right now? Because right now, we're just relying on our TIF and we're relying on the owners to go and get the funding themselves. And I think it's gonna be a mixture of us looking and getting creative in how to open it back.
Kim?
Well, first of all, there's a timeline, as I mentioned earlier, that $13 million in that TIF is going to be expiring the end of 2025, so we've got to get a plan in place. The challenge is the cost keeps going up. As you alluded to earlier, COVID and supply chain issues and increased construction costs have taken the remodeling from $100 million to $150. So we've got to look at how are we going to help support this through the use of public funds, through public-private partnerships. You know, can we get federal funds? Can we get state funds? Because it's really going to be a key tool for economic development in the region and bringing in more investment and bringing in so many more people who want to visit our beautiful, vibrant community. So I think all options need to be on the table and how we can support and actually get this done. It'll be amazing to have what is the second largest theater in the country open again and have it be a part of our community.
Thank you both. Another question from the audience that we've received a few of are around housing costs, but more specifically the additional dwellings ordinance. So, with housing costs rising for owners and renters, would you support the expansion of the ADU or the additional dwelling unit ordinance to go beyond the piloted areas? Kim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, accessory dwelling units create a real opportunity for more naturally occurring affordable housing, and that's really important. It's something I talk about a lot with affordable housing. The majority of affordable housing in the city isn't the really large developments, it's these smaller units. It might be the coach house, it might be a 2-flat, it might be a small unit building. And we need to do everything we can to not only protect and maintain them so they don't change owners, which then often leads to rent increases, but make sure how can we help grow that stock. And this is also an opportunity not only to grow that stock, but to give a possible revenue stream for maybe a family who is struggling to make ends meet, but they have an extra coach house or something that they could rent out, or they have a garden unit that they could rent out. So I fully support expanding the pilot program.
Angela?
Same. I think that we should definitely expand it. I think that this would give us more accessibility to housing. I think that it would definitely help our small owners, our small housing owners, and I definitely think that it would help create more stable housing. When we are looking at small housing owners, they really are the backbone of a lot of our communities. And I think that giving them that option to rent out a dwelling or a garden unit could really help us as a community when we're thinking about stabilizing housing.
Wonderful. Let's go to a question about serving everyone in the ward. So Uptown is rich with our ethnic diversity, our languages, our races, you name it. We've got it here in the 46th Ward. What can you say to assure residents that you would represent everyone across the ward? Angela?
Well, if you've stepped into the Neighbors for Clay campaign, you'll see they're already there. I'm extremely proud to say that we've got over 30 endorsements, and majority of them are coming from neighbors right here in this community, including Asian American Midwest Progressives, One People's Campaign. The Sierra Club is all over the country, but they are extremely rich in our ward. And I want to make sure that people understand that we are going to be doing this together. As a community, we thrive on our diversity. We thrive on neighbors coming from all walks of life. And that is something that I want to continue to foster. I want to make sure that, again, that we are giving our neighbors the accessibility, whether that's through translation materials, whether that's making sure that we are going around and actually holding space for them in their native tongues with their own communities and making sure that they feel seen. Our campaign has been committed to that through day one because this is the community that we serve, and we need to make sure that we are reaching neighbors at every single level. So absolutely making sure that we are serving neighbors at all walks of life, income levels, and background experiences, you name it, because we're already doing it.
Thank you. Kim?
So we're one of the most diverse wards in the country, and I want to do everything I can to protect that. When I talk about wanting to move the ward forward, we need to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind. And we need to make sure that our office is accessible for all of our immigrant populations, everyone in the ward, and that's something I'm really going to strive to do. One challenge I've heard over and over again from Black clubs is that there's been larger buildings and immigrant communities that they've been trying to engage in their Black club. And the challenge they've had is some management of these buildings don't allow them to post notices of community meetings or Black club meetings so that other individuals can engage in the process. So that's something I really want to work to change.
We've gotten several questions around CPD, so let's just start with this one. And Kim, we'll start it with you. How will you both address police profiling of Uptown citizens?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, when I talk about people feeling safe in their community, we can't neglect the fact that that also includes people who don't feel safe in their interactions with the police, and it's something we have to address. We simply do not have enough training for our officers to deal with this issue. As I mentioned earlier, we are only in 5% compliance with the consent decree, which is completely unacceptable. We need to make sure that all of our officers are trained to have more positive interactions with community. One thing that I've learned about recently is there's been smaller pilot programs where any individual who has an interaction with a police officer actually has the opportunity to respond directly to a survey that's put forth by a third-party company to rate that interaction. And that is used to provide future training for that officer, reviews with that officer, and that's something I want to explore further so that individuals can make sure that they have an opportunity to respond based on that interaction.
Angela?
Definitely think that it comes down to education and relationships. I grew up with a beat cop right here in this ward. His name was Officer Foote. He really was the blueprint of effective policing in my eyes because not only did he engage with young people in a respectful manner, but he would get out of his car and actually engage with us at the basketball courts. He would see us close to curfew and say, "All right now, it's time to go home." That relationship is something that we have to bring back. We have to make sure that our 19th and 20th Police District police officers are engaging with our people on a continuous basis, not just when we need them at the height of crime. They need to make sure that they have the resources, whether that's education and training as well, because I have been profiled by our police officers in this ward. A few years ago, I was on my way out on Valentine's Day. I caught a cab with my date, and we were pulled over in front of the Jewels on Montrose, pulled out of the back of our cab, and placed on the hood because we fit the profile of a couple who just committed a shooting on Valentine's Day. And when I went to go and complain afterwards, CPD said there was nothing they could do about it. I went to the alderman's office. They just gave me numbers, and this is where you could complain. And I want to make sure that our police officers, again, get to know our neighbors on an intimate basis, and that they are creating meaningful relationships so that we're not just continuing to racially profile.
We're going to do one last audience question before we go to closing statements, and we're just going to make it real fast. The question is around the size of City Council. Would you support a reevaluation of the size of City Council? Angela, yes or no?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good at where we are right now.
Kim?
I don't want to make it any smaller. I think it's really important that the number of constituents an alderman serves is something that's manageable, because I want to be out there walking down the sidewalks with you and seeing where the potholes are and seeing where the cameras aren't working. And if we decrease the size of the city council so that you have 5 times as many constituents, you're not going to be able to have that personal experience with your council member, which I think is really important.
Well, thank you. We did get a number of questions that were written directly to the candidates. They have indicated they will speak to you afterwards. So if you wrote down something that was specific for one, please make sure you stand by at the end to answer their questions. So this has been a very robust conversation. You share similarities. You're working parents. You're passionate about serving your neighbors. You're racking up the endorsements from big names and institutions. Please close out with how you are different and what your differences mean for the 46th Ward. Kim, we will start with you.
Well, I just want to say I can't believe Election Day is next week. I started this campaign pregnant, and now my little nugget is 7 months old, which is hard to believe, and she's trying to crawl. She needs to wait another 5 days. I think that Angela and I share a lot of similarities about our vision for the ward, and I'm just very optimistic about the ward. I'm optimistic that with you, that we can build a neighborhood where we feel safe walking to school, where we can have a neighborhood where families who have mental health challenges in their family can find the care that they need, that we can protect the diversity by making sure that we have affordable housing, and that we can make sure that we have excellent constituent services. And that's something they know how to do on day one, and I can get done. I think fundamentally it comes down to a difference in whether or not we need to fund the vacant positions in the police department, and I believe we do, and that's my approach, is that has to be a part of the public safety equation. But we've got so many things to be hopeful for in the ward, and I know we can do these things together. And because I'm going to be ready on day one of this job, that's why I have the endorsements that I do. I've worked with these elected officials for over 22 years. I have 10 years of experience in government. I've helped launch a nonprofit health insurance company, take the profit out of healthcare. And with Walgreens, I've launched COVID vaccines in 8 states and literally opened some of the first COVID testing locations in the entire country. I've worked to help lower the cost of prescription drugs and deal with organized retail crime syndicates that are preying upon our young kids and victims of human trafficking. I know how to create public-private partnerships. I know how to navigate government, and I know how to serve the community. It's hard to believe we're almost at the end, but I would be so very honored to have your vote, and thank you for coming tonight and listening.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again for being here tonight. We are almost there, neighbors. I promise you we will stop knocking on your doors in a few hours. We are all tired of it. One thing that I am proud of and that I think really separates myself from Kim is that this campaign is powered by the people. And this campaign is going to come down to people versus profits. This campaign has the support of over 30 grassroots organizations and current city council members. Right now, our ward is the only race outside of the mayor's race that has unlimited income contributions because big name developers, outside corporations, charter schools have spent over $200,000 trying to oppose the community of this ward. They have tried to get misinformation and lies in front of you because they are afraid of the community actually having a alderperson that is beholden to you. We have raised over $200,000, and none of that has come from corporations or developers who want to protect their bottom line in this community. That speaks volumes, because I'm not trying to put fear in front of you. I'm trying to put community in front of you. And I think that that is the pivot that we are in. We are gonna have a new city council. We are gonna have a new mayor. We have to have somebody who's going to go in there and not be beholden to the people who are just trying to eat up our communities right now. The lies that you've been seeing on your YouTube ads, the misinformation that you get in the mail are coming from outside corporations. Why are they so interested in the 46th Ward? You have to ask yourself, you must ask yourself, what is at stake for them that they want to instill their candidate to do their bidding? I am going to city council to fight for all of us. Whether you vote for me or not, I am committed to working with you, neighbor, and we're gonna do this. I'm proud to say that we got 36% of the vote, you all. The people already spoke. And they spoke and they said that the community is going to stand up and fight for every single neighbor in the 46th Ward. So I am extremely proud of that, and I'm humbled by that, and I appreciate you all again. Let's go vote.
Thank you both. Thank you for the opportunity to press you on the questions. Thank you for showing up and answering the questions. We so appreciate it. And before I close out, I just want to thank Uptown United's board. If you're an Uptown United board member or an Uptown Chamber of Commerce board member, can you please just quickly stand up and raise your hand, because it's these volunteers in the community that allow us and our staff to do the jobs that we do. So please stand up. I see some of you. Stand podiums right. And with that, I thank you so much for allowing me to moderate this, and I will turn it back over to Jackie Lowy. Jackie?
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you once again for coming out for this. I was remiss earlier in thanking so much the folks at Wilson Abbey, Carl in the back, if you could raise your hand, and Ed, our sound guy. Thank you very much for your efforts tonight. All done on your own time. I am curious, real quick show of hands, how many people have actually been in this venue, in this space here? Oh, so more than you than I might have thought, but I was teasing Carl. I said, thanks so much for putting up all these incredible decorations for our forum tonight. So apparently they were here before, but. So again, thank you so much for coming out to this. Uptown United, over the many years that I've been involved in the organization, also prides ourselves on working very closely with the Aldermanic office. We see it as a partnership, and looking forward to the best woman winning, and working very closely with the new Aldermanic candidate, or Alderperson in the 46th Ward. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.